Hello, my name is Margaret Adele, and welcome back to another indie book review. Yes, I am wearing the same clothes as the last one because I love to sit and record in big sessions. So this time I am tackling Stitches by Jennifer Cuddon. This is contemporary. I'm not quite sure what age range it would be for because the main character goes from the age of 12 to 30 over the course of the story. So go with that what you will. This revolves around young Gemini who is struggling with negligent parents, depressive thoughts, and self-harm when she meets Brooklyn, who begins to take over all of her thoughts. But is it love, or is it something that's going to lead to something much darker? Now, I was very intrigued by that premise. I loved dark contemporary. I loved The Girls of 17 Swan Street, which is all about a woman fighting her eating disorder. So I loved the idea of it. However, this book kind of took some turns I wish it hadn't. A lot of turns I wish it hadn't. Now, this book, as the author explained to me, from majority of the time is semi-autobiographical based on her real life, and then the very end turns totally fictional. So I had to keep that in mind as I was reading all of this. And it made me slightly uncomfortable to keep that in mind as I was reading all of this, because one of the biggest things that I struggled with was I really didn't like the protagonist. Like, at all. Gemini, or at least that's her current name in this version of the story. I believe it was Jill in an earlier draft because at multiple points throughout the book, characters call her Jill. But regardless, little editing thing, she isn't likable at all. And not just because of the depression or the negligent parents or the home life or any of that. She is just horribly judgmental towards other people. There was very much that kind of, oh, every other kid in school did this or thinks like this or what have you, that kind of all of the other tiny minds. Very much the I'm not like other girls thing. She slut shamed, she fat shamed. She at one point mentioned that she liked being friends with this one girl in particular because she knew that that one girl wasn't as pretty as she was, and so she was happy to be friends with her. And like, none of that made for a likable character. And of course I still felt sympathy for the struggles that she was having with depression and self-harm, but like, in general, was not a nice person. So I didn't necessarily think as sympathetic thoughts as I could have. The romance with Brooklyn, which is supposed to be the catalyst for most of this, was lackluster. The entire relationship takes place over 2.5 weeks, where they're not even like officially boyfriend-girlfriend, they're just sleeping with each other, and here's her first, she sleeps with him for the first time ever, and spends the rest of the book obsessing over him about that. And he isn't gaslighting her, he's not leading her around, like he's not, once it's done, it's done. He doesn't respond to it when she tries to call or write him letters. So you can't even too much fault him on that aspect, but it reads like she becomes obsessed with the guy that she gave her virginity to, almost. Like, because he was her first, he's the one she's obsessed with, and that runs throughout the entire book. And I don't get it. Like, even reading it from her perspective, I couldn't really feel anything for him. He seemed as generic as any other guy character. There were some laughable moments where another character would be like, oh, I don't know, he just seems like every other guy that's out there. And Jim and I would snap and be like, she was so judgmental. When, like, 5 pages ago, she was being like, oh, all the kids in the school are just like. So, she doesn't like when anyone's judgmental against him. The one part that I actually stopped just disliking Gemini and started actively hating her as a character happens fairly late in the book, after she and Brooklyn have gone their separate ways, but she's still pining over him. She comes back to town for a visit, and she's driving around with another friend, and they pass a girl. And it's a girl that she kind of knows of, and her friend explains to Gemini that that girl says that Brooklyn raped her, basically saying that she attacked her, and Gemini is immediately furious. And my first thought was, awesome, great. She's going to see that this guy she's been pining over isn't all that awesome. No. She's pissed at the girl that says she was raped by him. To the extent that she tries to get out of a moving car to go beat the girl up. Like, not only victim blaming, she wants to beat her. And I immediately started hating her because of that. Like, and then later on, there are, I don't want to spoil, but I have to give trigger warnings for rape. Very graphic rape scenes in this. So if that is a trigger for you, you're going to want to stay away. I don't want to spoil too much, but I can't in good conscience let anyone that is a survivor of that with that as a trigger read this. But I would think after that, oh, Gemini's going to learn what it's like to be the victim that no one believes. No growth. Now, like I said, this all is semi-autobiographical. And I was trying to keep that in mind. But in the back of my mind thinking, wow, I really hope this isn't an accurate representation of who the author is as a person. And it could be a depiction of who she was. I'm not exactly sure when the events of the story take place, but I'm guessing around like mid to early 2000s, because like no one really has a cell phone, or not many people have a cell phone. So that hints at early to mid 2000s, and things like slut shaming and fat shaming and I'm not like other girlsing was much more accepted in the 2000s. So it could have been a sign of growth. However, you never see the growth in here. She's pretty much that character the entire time. However, that doesn't necessarily mean that it is an exact depiction of the author. It might be just a weirdness in the writing style. The writing style did come across as very talking down to the reader and over-explaining things that didn't need to be explained. For example, a character would nod and then the narrative would have to explain why that character just nodded. So it'd be like, oh, we should get out of here, I said. So-and-so nodded, showing that they agreed we should get out of here. Like, no, we got that from the nod. So there was that aspect. And it might just be the writing style that made it come across in certain ways. But in general, I'm really hoping it's not that strictly true to life. Because in all of my interactions with her, the author has been really nice. So I'm going to give her the benefit of the doubt and just say that it was either fictionalized or just came across unintentionally that way. But the one part that I really struggled with was the very end when the character is 30. And I won't go into too much detail because spoilers, but this part is entirely fictional. So wholly made up. It is the most overly shock value version of mental health that I've seen lately in a book. Up until that point, the character had only ever displayed moments of depression or wanting to cut to alleviate the numbness she felt, which all made sense, and it more or less seemed honest, even if it was brutally honest. The end, though, turns like what a horror movie thinks mental illness is, and she's seeing things and hearing voices, and is she a murderer? No, yes, kind of. Like, she turns basically psychotic, almost. And there's a whole mystery of what she may or may not have done, and I'll leave that up to you to read if you're interested. But it made no sense. Depression doesn't magically turn into schizophrenia. You either have schizophrenia or you don't. It doesn't, like, morph out of one mental illness does not somehow magically morph into another one, if that makes sense. And that's kind of what came across here. And it also seemed totally unnecessary of an ending, because if you read in the bio in the background, the author's married with kids. And I know you can't assume that, oh, she's perfectly happy because she's a wife and mother, but like, you know, her love life, at least to a certain extent, went well to a certain extent. Like, you know that it did not end nearly as weirdly as it does here. So why was that the ending she went with? If this is supposed to be autobiographical, why does it go off the rails to a movie ending of a movie's depiction of mental illness? So that kind of lost it for me. In general, I still am interested in her life story, but I would rather be reading a nonfiction memoir or a literal autobiography than a fictionalized version. I would have loved to have had that older voice coming in to be like, okay, yeah, I know I was being horrible right there, but that was the culture of the time, and you know, to show the growth of, yeah, me constantly talking about how chubby this girl wasn't kind of me as a friend, but it was where my head was at then, or something like that, to show the growth as a person. And honestly, if the author wrote that wholly autobiographical, wholly nonfiction memoir, I probably would read it. I probably would be all for it. This just lost it for me. The writing style was iffy. The character was unlikable. The romance, I didn't really understand the obsession, even coming from her point of view. And the ending was just whatever, off the rails. But in general, I gave this book 2 stars, which I was debating 1 or 2, but at the end of the day, I am still always floored by people willing to bare their souls in such a intimate way to share their tales, especially when you're talking about things like cutting your arms just to feel anything in life. So I am very cognizant of how hard this story probably was for Jennifer Cuddon to write at times, but I also have to look at it as a piece of work, and as a piece of work, it was not that great for me. So we're going 2 stars with this one. This does not mean I won't read anything else from Jennifer Cuddon. I am always up for a quote-unquote redemption arc. I would always be up for reading a memoir or another fictional piece, but this one just did not really do it for me. So, this is usually the part where I say, if you'd like a review, but now I'm nervous that people are going to be afraid of low reviews after this one. But in general, I enjoyed it for what it was trying to get across. The rest lost it for me. If you would like a review, please check down in the description below. I will have my email, and maybe if I'm remembering, I'll have my review policy. Please don't let this one chase you away. This one just didn't hit it for me, but I've given plenty of other very positive reviews. So I don't want anyone to assume that they're going to get a 2-star from me if they send me their book. I am grateful for every book I got. I'm still grateful that she sent me this one. Just wasn't working. But with nothing else to say, I hope you have a wonderful day and a marvelous tomorrow.